The diaper fight at Utah County Jail is a memorable event that will stick in our minds for a long time. The diaper fight at the Utah County Jail wasn't as wild as the Honduras prison riot that led to the death of 40 people. In female prisons, some wild incidents showcase group brawls, while others delve into more intimate experiences. One officer referred to Scott Spittler Sr. at the Rockville Correctional Facility was so smitten by an inmate that he helped her escape. Let's talk about some of the wildest things that have happened in female prison. Ottawa County Jail fight. The events that unfolded inside the Ottawa County Jail were a mix of frustration, desperation, and the unpredictable nature of prison life, resulting in a series of fights that would go down in the facility's history. It all started with what seemed like a harmless prank. Bored inmates, looking to shake up their monotonous days, began dousing each other's belongings in juice. What began as a silly act quickly escalated, and before long, things spiraled out of control. The sticky juice became a symbol of their rebellion, drawing the attention of the guards. As tensions flared, the inmates' behavior took a dangerous turn. Some decided to up the ante by throwing bleach at each other, trying to assert their dominance and stir up even more chaos. The prison turned into a scene of complete mayhem, with trash flying everywhere, adding to the already charged atmosphere. Inmates were clashing right in front of the correctional officers, making the situation even more intense. It was a brutal scene that left several individuals injured, just like the next incident on this list. Las Vegas prison fight. In Las Vegas, the Clark County Detention Center turned into a battleground when two inmates clashed, one of them being Jennifer. Known for her strong personality, Jennifer had been butting heads with another inmate for a while. Thanks to some personal issues and the stress of being locked up, things really heated up when a disagreement over shared facilities spiraled into a full-blown argument. Before anyone knew it, the verbal spat turned physical, grabbing the attention of fellow inmates and guards alike, creating quite the chaotic scene. As the two women struggled, guards quickly stepped in to break it up and restore some semblance of order. After the dust settled, both Jennifer and her opponent faced disciplinary measures, and the detention center's administration launched an investigation into what had gone down. It's true that Jennifer's fight with another inmate was one for the histories, but in some cases, prisons were being deliberately problematic, as you'll see in our next entry. Diaper fights in Utah County Jail. The wild and crazy event referred to as the diaper battles at Utah County Jail stands out as one of the most unusual events ever recorded in a correctional facility. The origins of the whole diaper fight started from what seemed like a harmless argument between the inmates. There had been a lot of built-up tension in the place thanks to overcrowding and the pressure of being locked up. The situation reached a boiling point when an inmate named Nina, famous for her passionate nature and strong leadership, decided it was time to take action. Annoyed by the shortage of essential supplies, she gathered a crew of fellow inmates, and they came up with a strategy to highlight their struggles. What started as a simple protest soon escalated into complete chaos as tempers flared and feelings ran wild. The inmates began hurling diapers at each other, turning the jail into a scene of rage. The guards were caught off guard by the sudden twist in events and found it tough to regain control as things started to spiral out of hand. Of course, this wasn't the only noteworthy fight in a women's prison, as you'll see shortly. Fourth, Honduras prison riots. On the 20th of June, 2023, the Women's Center for Social Adaptation in Taimara, Honduras, became the epicenter of a violent and deadly prison riot that shocked the nation. The riot broke out unexpectedly and was the result of growing frustrations and issues among the inmates, made worse by overcrowding, insufficient resources, and a general feeling of being overlooked. With basic needs not being met and few chances for rehabilitation or personal growth, tensions were high and ready to explode. The spark that ignited the riot was a clash between competing factions in the prison. These groups had been in a tense battle for dominance, and it finally erupted into outright violence. The initial disorder quickly escalated as more inmates joined the fray, turning the prison into a battleground. During the riot, total chaos took over the facility. Inmates grabbed whatever they could find to use as weapons, and things quickly got out of hand. A few women even got their hands on guns, which led to some really tragic outcomes. By the time the dust settled, more than 40 people had lost their lives. This riot was just as heartbreaking as the next one we'll be discussing in this video. 5. Bedford Hills Correctional Facility fight. The Bedford Hills Correctional Facility for Women in New York recently witnessed a major and troubling clash between inmates and staff. This conflict was driven by the inmates' growing frustration over their living conditions, feelings of mistreatment, and insufficient resources. With overcrowding and tight budgets, the facility struggled to cater to the needs of the women, which only fueled their discontent. One day, during a routine check by the guards, tensions boiled over. A disagreement about personal items ignited a fiery exchange between the guards and a group of inmates. What started as a verbal spat quickly escalated escalated into a full-blown brawl, creating chaos that spread throughout the facility. Both sides were taken by surprise by the intensity of the situation. As the brawl broke out, the facility's management jumped into action to take back control and stop things from getting worse. They sent in more security staff to the area and put plans in place to separate those involved and bring back some order. The following prison fight on this list resulted in 30 correctional officers losing their homes. Kingston Prison Fight. On April 22, 1994, the prison for women in Kingston, Ontario, became the site of a violent altercation that would leave a lasting impact on the Canadian correctional system. This event, involving 6 inmates and several guards, was definitely one for the books. Like many prisons back then, this one was having a tough time keeping its population in check. Meanwhile, the inmates were forming their own groups and trying to establish their own power dynamics inside. The spark that ignited the violent clash that day was a disagreement over how to handle one inmate's personal items. Things escalated fast when the guards tried to impose some discipline, which led to a fiery back and forth between the staff and a bunch of inmates. As tensions rose, 6 prisoners stood their ground against the guards, refusing to follow orders. The guards, taken aback by the level of pushback, found it hard to regain control as the chaos spread throughout the prison. It led to a fire that left 30 guards homeless. Violence isn't the only common problem in female prisons. There is also the issue of theft, as you'll see. El Buen Pastor prison theft. El Buen Pastor prison in Bogota, Colombia, is well known for its overcrowded situation and the many issues that come with housing a large number of violent offenders. One of the ongoing problems in this facility is theft, which stems from a mix of desperation, lack of resources, and the complicated social interactions among inmates. The overcrowding is a major issue, as the prison holds far more inmates than it was designed for, resulting in cramped quarters and limited access to essential items. In this kind of setting, resources become highly sought after, and the struggle for these limited goods can push inmates to steal just to get by. The most frequently stolen items include personal belongings, hygiene products, and food. The ones who suffer the most from these thefts are often the most vulnerable inmates, those without strong connections or the ability to protect their stuff. These individuals, already facing the tough realities of prison life, find themselves even more victimized when their belongings are taken. Theft, much like protests, is a common occurrence in all prisons, not just in women's facilities, as we'll explore in the next section. Modelo Prison Protest. The Modelo prison in Bucaramanga, Colombia, turned into the center of a tense showdown between inmates and the government. This protest, filled with violence and disorder, erupted as prisoners aimed to highlight their issues and push for improvements amid terrible living conditions. The inmates were dealing with numerous systemic problems that severely impacted their quality of life. Tensions boiled over when a bunch of ignored complaints sparked a major uprising. As the protest erupted, inmates took to the prison yard, armed with makeshift weapons and a determination to make their voices heard. The early moments of the protest saw a heated standoff between the inmates and the prison guards, with both sides preparing for potential violence. Things escalated when inmates started throwing rocks at the guards, who found it tough to keep the situation under control as it descended into chaos. Unfortunately, there were casualties on both sides. In a different scenario, although no lives were lost, women faced brutal treatment. Inmates giving birth in HMP Bronzefield Prison. In the year 2019, a HMP Bronzefield prison, located in the United Kingdom, became the center of a distressing incident that highlighted the severe inadequacies in the care of pregnant inmates. This high-security women's prison, notorious for holding some of the most dangerous female criminals, recently made headlines due to 2 shocking childbirth incidents that raised serious concerns. In the first case, a woman was left to give birth all alone in her cell. Even though she was well into labor, she received zero medical help or support from the prison staff. Her screams echoed through the halls as she faced the intense pain of childbirth without any professional care. This lack of timely medical attention not only put the mother's life at risk, but also jeopardized the safety of her newborn. In another alarming situation, a different pregnant inmate went into labor during the night. With no staff around to help, she had to depend on another pregnant inmate for support. While these women faced serious injustices within the system, the next inmate was a source of fear for the officers. Inmates fight prison officials at Florida State Prison. Eileen Wuornos, one of the most infamous female serial killers in American history, was incarcerated at Florida State Prison, where her time behind bars was marked by a series of confrontations with correctional staff and fellow inmates. Wuornos was found guilty of killing 7 men between 1989 and 1990, which landed her on death row. Her explosive personality and difficult background created a charged environment during her time in prison. She often clashed with the correctional staff, driven by a deep-rooted distrust of authority that stemmed from her chaotic childhood. Wuornos frequently claimed that the prison staff mistreated her and were plotting against her, which sparked intense arguments where she would unleash a stream of insults and threats. Her erratic behavior made her tough to handle, requiring the guards to stay on high alert. Plus, her struggle to connect with other inmates often left her feeling alone. While Warnos caused her fair share of trouble, the next women on this list faced even worse fate. Force feeding at Guantanamo Bay Detention Center. The Guantanamo Bay Detention Center has been a hot topic for a while now, often criticized for how it treats its prisoners. One of the most debated issues is the force feeding of inmates who go on hunger strikes. This method has faced a lot of backlash from human rights groups and has ignited a worldwide discussion about the ethics behind it. Hunger strikes at Guantanamo Bay have been a form of protest used by inmates to draw attention to their indefinite detention and the harsh conditions they face. A lot of these detainees, who have been stuck without charges for years, end up turning to hunger strikes as a desperate plea for justice and humane treatment. The detention center has resorted to the debated practice of force feeding to stop inmates from starving. This method involves putting a tube through the nose, guiding it down the esophagus and into the stomach. While force feeding is one issue, the next facility on the list took it a step further by leaving inmates without clothes, stripping them of their dignity. Inmate left without clothes at Etowah County Jail. The incident at Etowah County Jail involving a woman left without clothes was an abuse of human rights. LT raised serious questions about the standards of care and human dignity afforded to those in custody. Ashley, the inmate at the center of this situation, found herself in a nightmare that no one behind bars should ever face. Without any clothes, she was left feeling completely vulnerable. The whole mess started with a bunch of administrative slip-ups and a serious lack of proper procedures. It all kicked off when she was put in a holding cell, but nobody bothered to give her any clothes, leaving her exposed for way too long. To make matters worse, the jail staff seemed indifferent, ignoring her desperate calls for help even though they knew what was going on. After the public outcry, the jail administration decided to launch an internal probe to figure out what went wrong and who was to blame. They soon realized this wasn't just a one-time thing. It was more like a pattern among the correctional officers. That's for today's video. See you in the next.